We've both got a great and a good in a highly successful person called Maz Jobrani. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Johnny. How you doing?
Yeah, it feels like we've almost done this episode before, which we
Yeah,
have because of
yeah.
technology.
For those of you watching, we had to restart it because of technology, but here we are.
Absolutely, the wonders of technology. So, for those of you who have not been living, especially in the Iranian community, and don't know who Maz Jobrani is, just a little research that I've done. Maz is an Iranian American comedian and actor who's been part of the Axis of Evil comedy group, LA Times bestseller, memoir, I'm Not a Terrorist, but I played one on TV. He's done Netflix comedy shows. He's also appeared in numerous films, television shows, including Better Off Ted, on radio and in comedy clubs. He's also been involved in films like The Interpreter, Friday After Next, Dragonfly. He's appeared as a regular character on 2017 CBS sitcom Superior Donuts, and he's launched his exciting new show, The Birds and the Bees, on YouTube. So we talked about this before, prior to the technology getting in the way, about you choosing YouTube as your forum for this new show.
Yeah, this is my seventh comedy special, and I've had specials on Netflix, Comedy Central, Showtime, everywhere. And this time around, I decided to put on YouTube because I think a lot of comedians are starting to put their specials on YouTube. You don't have to wait for a gatekeeper to approve what you want to put out in the world. And also, you get direct contact with the fans. And it's just a great way to go international. I've had people see the birds and the bees from Norway, from South America. I've gotten messages from people saying I'm watching it in Hungary. They can give you a tip, which is very interesting. Like I feel like a stripper every time I get tipped, but hey, man, I'll take it. Like, how much clothes do I have to take off? But the truth is, it was an interesting way to. It's the way, and for many, for a whole generation, to get their content out. There's so many people doing so much on YouTube, from instructional videos to comedy to you name it. And I thought, why not put my stuff out that way? My material was ready, and I filmed it at the Comedy Store, which is a famous club in Los Angeles where I got my start. And I think people want to laugh, and I've put it out there. We've got over 160,000 views, and we just keep pushing and taking that number higher and higher.
Yeah, even myself, when I'm trying to put something or do something and I don't look at the instructions, I'll just put a YouTube video to show me the way. So it's seen so many things in all different aspects where people, even in travel, doing food programs, instead of chefs dominating, they're creating these monster channels where they've got millions and millions of subscribers. So it's really interesting how things are changing. I wanted to ask you, Maz, did comedy come naturally to you?
I was a fan of comedy since I was a young kid. When I first came to America, I was about 6 years old, and I was watching all the cartoons. Back then, it was Woody Woodpecker, Popeye, Bugs Bunny, all of that stuff. And then eventually, once I got old enough, I started watching Saturday Night Live. I became a big fan of Eddie Murphy's. And then my friends in school were some of the funny people. I loved hanging out with funny people. And the truth is, I always say there were some people that I grew up with that were funnier than I was, but they just didn't find the focus and the drive to get into this world of comedy. So for me, it was definitely something I was a fan of. And then from there, I decided to get into it. And at the age of 12, I got on stage in my school to do the musical. And I just felt alive. I felt alive on stage, and I've been chasing that feeling since.
Yeah, sometimes you wonder why one person makes it and not another. And talent, good timing, and also just getting that opportunity, isn't it? That we all need in life, that one big one to make a breakthrough.
I also think part of it is, we all are trying to find what we love to do. If you're lucky enough to find it when you're young, then you're way ahead of the game. I was able to find that at the age of 12. I found what I loved doing. And then, so even though my family kept pushing me to do other things, immigrant family, Iranian family, lawyer, doctor, engineers, what they wanted, I kept finding ways to get on stage. So I always tell young people, if you have a passion, whatever that passion is, Just stick to it. Don't listen to your parents. Nobody knows what you love deep down inside. And so that's a big part of it. Now, you said, what was the big break for me? It's a series of breaks. My one of my big breaks was becoming a regular at the Comedy Store. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to film my special at that club, because that was the place where I grew. And this was about 23, 24 years ago when I first started in stand-up comedy. The way you would become a regular at the Comedy Store in Los Angeles, you'd perform in front of the owner, Mitzi Shore. And you would do 3 minutes. And then if they liked you, they'd say, come back a few weeks later, do 6. If they liked you, they say, come back a few weeks later, do 10. And then once you did the 10, she would tell you either you're going to be a regular or go away and come back in a year thing. So once I became a regular at that club, I would say I was able to grow exponentially, because she would put me on the lineup following some of the biggest and strongest comedians in the comedy world. And I had to learn how to be better and grow. And I grew exponentially at that club.
We really fascinating insights. Were you nervous, or have you always been naturally confident and a performer?
We're all nervous. I think we all, there's always moments when you're nervous. And then the more you do it, the less nervous you get. And then, or maybe the nervousness is not as much as it was before, because ultimately, no matter what you're doing, you're always in the back of your mind worried, like, oh, is this going to go how I want it to? But I think I compare stand up to maybe painting, where you have a blank canvas and you start working on it, and you just keep working on it and keep working on it. And I assume for a painter, a lot of times a painter might be trying to go one way, and then they end up, the brush goes another, shows them something else, and they go another way. And eventually that painting is done, and then they let it dry and they sell it or put it up at a showing of some sort. And that's what our stand-up is. Like the fact that I've got 7 comedy specials, those all happened because after a year to 2 years of doing that material and writing it and performing it around the world, I got to a point where I said, okay, this is ready to be filmed. And then I filmed it, and then I put it out. And then I was like, okay, now I got to start on my next special, which would be like my next painting. So you do it so much. Sometimes you perform 2-3 times in a night, where it brings the nerves down, because you go, sometimes you might kill on one show and die on the next. And sometimes it's your fault, and sometimes it's the audience, and sometimes it's the valet parking, or so once you really lower the stakes for yourself, it makes it easier to not be nervous.
Really, really interesting. They say that comedians, although they're in the business of making people laugh, can disproportionately actually suffer either more from mental health problems or actually be quite depressed in their private life when you go the other way. And it's weird to think that, because you think someone who's funny, the kind of label or image that people have of that person is, oh, he must be always funny in his life and he must be always joyful and everything else. But it's not always like that, is it, in terms of your own private life?
I don't know. I've heard those statistics before too. I don't know how different we are than the general population. I think in the general population, you're going to find people you have mental health issues, and they might suffer from depression or bipolar disorder or whatever it is. And so you're going to run into that in the comedy world as well. The difference is, in the comedy world, our job is to make you laugh. So if I'm an accountant who is suffering from depression, you might not even know it, because I've never made you laugh or never shown you another side of me. For us, we get on stage and we go, hey, laugh, laugh. And then when you see the guy's depressed, you go, oh my gosh, I had no idea. So I think that it exists. I've seen comedians who have some mental health issues, but I think the reason it stands out so much is because our job is to make you laugh. And then when you see us not being funny, then sometimes people go, oh, wow, there's some problems going on.
And do you find you're always expected to make someone laugh, like in any venues? Okay, come and make me laugh.
Somewhat. There's some people who say that. You'll be at a party and someone will say, oh, do that joke or say that thing. And so, yes, there's some people who expect that. But most people nowadays, I think, are pretty respectful of the boundaries. And they know that if you're a doctor at a party, you're not supposed to walk up to them and go, hey, doc, I got this thing. If you could diagnose me right now, that would be great. You give the person their space. And similarly with comedy, I think I've definitely seen people be a little more respectful of not asking me to try and make them laugh just in public. Part of it is when they say tell a joke, I go, I'm not a joke teller, I'm a stand-up comedian. And the job of a stand-up comedian is to get on stage and talk about whatever interests them and they want to talk about and make that funny. Now there are moments when I'm at a party or somewhere and I'm having a conversation, I'm telling a story that's got funny, it's a funny story, but I don't have a lot of jokes lined up. Two guys walk into a bar kind of jokes. Some comedians might, but I don't. And so that's when if someone says, be funny, tell a joke, I go, I got nothing. I could tickle you, but that's about it.
Yeah, it's a bit like me when if I'm at a party, sometimes because of what I do in terms of headhunting or careers, is can you give me a job? It doesn't quite work like that. In terms of the comedy and the acting, is your main love still stand up? Is that what you prefer above everything else that you do?
Yeah, I've acted, I've done stand up, I've produced, I've written. I love it all. I've always said if I'm able to get on a set of a project that I love or I'm with people that I really enjoy hanging out with, it's fantastic. It's always been fun to see that project come to fruition, watch it go through the editing, and then share it with the world. That said, the beauty of stand up is its immediacy. So when you're performing live, just last weekend I was in San Jose, and over the weekend we had something like almost 2,000 people show up. So there was shows in front of several hundred people at a time. They're laughing. I'm talking to them. I'm doing crowd work. That's right then and there. If I do a movie or TV show, it takes several months, maybe even more, till I get to see it. The immediacy is preferred, but I love it all. I'm so lucky to be able to be in this business and do what I love doing, and I hope I can keep doing it till I'm 80.
One of the greatest qualities that you have, apart from your natural ability to make people laugh, is the sense that you're so humble. You're almost the Rafael Nadal of comedy when it comes to the Iranian community. Because sometimes when it comes to the Iranian community or certain cultures, if you hit certain heights, there can be a little bit of snobbery or I'm reached this level. And because in Middle Eastern culture it can be quite status orientated or hierarchical, but you're just such a humble person despite the enormous success that you've had.
Yeah, I didn't know Rafa had that reputation, but that's good to know. I don't see any reason to have any kind of attitude. We all, first of all, we get to do what we love doing, but secondly, it's not like I'm saving lives. I'm telling jokes. I'm acting. So I try to put the ego aside. I think that you got to relate to people, right? I'll be honest with you. I did an event one time at this really hoity-toity event where it was at some fancy hotel in New York. And before I went on stage, the way to get to the stage was through the kitchen. So I was hanging out near the kitchen area, and I felt a lot more related to the servers and the waiters and the waitresses and the bus people than the audience that was out there. The audience that was out there, it was some big money thing. And so they were all very well off. And I just felt like I was relating to these guys because I've waited tables before. And yeah, I enjoyed talking to them. You should be able to talk to them. And you should be able to talk to kings and queens and all in. There's no reason to think you're some hot commodity.
It's true. I always say, treat people as you would want to be treated, from someone who's a
Yeah,
cleaner
absolutely.
up to the
Yeah.
CEO. Get
You
that?
learn to shake a hand. I've
Yeah.
taught my kids. I said, look them in the eyes and shake their hands, whoever you meet. I think it puts people in a good frame of mind. Even this morning, I went somewhere and I was with someone. I was doing an interview, and the booker was with me, and there was a security person at the front who said, "Oh, you got to sign in." And the booker was a little frustrated with the security person, and I just smiled at the security person and said, "Thank you." Because she's sitting there trying to do her job. So who am I to pull a little ego card out? It's stupid.
Yeah, it's true. It's that saying, isn't it? Often people forget what someone says, but they remember how someone made them feel.
Yeah,
They'll
absolutely.
remember that, and it's how
Yeah.
you can make someone feel. So we've gone through testing time within the community, obviously
Hmm.
with the Iran Revolution. And you've done so much as well in doing your bit in becoming an activist of sort. Did that come as a surprise to you after everything, the way it gripped you and how this has unfolded for the community?
It wasn't a surprise to me. I think we all, most people in the public eye, rose to the occasion and tried to amplify the voices of the people of Iran as they demanded their freedoms. It's the least we could do. Once again, there's actually people in Iran risking their lives for freedom, for women, for religious minorities, for the LGBTQ community, and for the people of Iran in general. So the least we can do is put some posts up on our Instagram page or repost stuff or try to bring it to the attention of the Western media so it gets more coverage. So I wasn't surprised by the fact that I, as well as many, were basically, like you said, becoming kind of activists of sorts. There's real activists who are actually out there doing stuff. I feel like just posting and showing up at protests and doing the small amount of stuff that I was able to do was the least I could do. And gosh, I've been in America since I was 6 years old. So most of my life I've been in the US. And I think a lot of us from around the world, we still feel a tie to our motherland and we want freedom for those people. And so it was a community-wide PTSD where everybody was just highly emotional. 24 hours a day, we were seeing videos. It was interesting to see how my Iranian friends were and how my non-Iranian friends, because the non-Iranian friends didn't even know what was going on. So you'd run into somebody who's your buddy down the street and say, hey, how's it going today? And they'd say, oh, yeah, I'm running late. I got to go pick up my kids and do this and that. Their worries were just like day-to-day worries. And you were thinking, wait a minute, you didn't see the video today of the atrocities that were happening in Iran? And they were like, no, I didn't. So we were all plugged to our social media and seeing what was happening. And like I said, it pulled us all in. And I continue to hope for a free Iran.
Yeah, it's that great Rumi quote, isn't it? Alone you're a drop in the ocean, together we become the ocean.
Beautiful.
It's just about doing your bit, just doing your bit.
Yeah.
And you've done more than that from your side of things, because some people have hesitated because maybe they have family, maybe they have other stuff going on where they feel there could be real sense of consequence or damage. But you haven't, you've been amongst others that haven't.
I try not to judge others because, as you said, everyone's got their own reasons. Like the criticism that the football team was getting, I thought was unfair because they do have relatives in Iran. They do live in Iran. And for us to expect them to do some noble, courageous act that would jeopardize their families, I think was more than we should be asking for. They're these young men who were just trying to live their lives and they were thrust into that spot. I think some people that did not get involved probably had their reasons. And again, I'm not gonna question that. I'm just gonna do my thing and stick with my way of expressing myself in that case.
Yeah, because the Iranian community can sometimes be guilty of that, can't it?
Listen, we have a lot of division. We have a lot of judgment. It's unfortunate. I think that one of the reasons why the Islamic regime is able to continue to exist is the divisions within the Iranian community and in particular the Iranian diaspora. When they go after each other, who benefits? Well, the Islamic regime benefits. And so it's okay for us to have different opinions about how we think we should proceed. But I think we should come together, come to the table and say, listen, ultimately, we all want the freedoms for the people of Iran. So let's take our opinions, whether they're on the far left or the far right, and let's at least come together and say that we can stand side by side in solidarity against the oppression that the Islamic regime is bringing on the people of Iran.
Yeah, it's true. And I think largely the diaspora have been really great in, because at the beginning, the Iranians in Iran said one thing, please be our voice. And I think it was the most tweeted hashtag, Masa Armenia of all time. They wanted to get one tweet for every single Iranian, which was 85 million. I think they hit over 125 million. So they completely won the media war. The problem has been, like I said, the mainstream hasn't been always there in terms of showing it. When it comes to your career to date and what you've done, what's the goals and the aspirations moving forward? Are there things that you still want to tick off in terms of achievables of what's next for you, Maz?
I would say that one thing I've really wanted to do is to have my own show on television, and that has not happened yet. I've gotten close several times, but it just hasn't come to fruition. So I continue to pitch ideas, I continue to write stuff, I continue to try to put something together. And who knows, maybe the YouTube route is the way to go. I just create my own show and just put it up and don't wait for the gatekeepers, which might happen. But that would be for me a nice career win. And then hopefully going beyond that, I can help other talented people that I find talented produce their stuff, because I feel there's a lot of talent coming up. When I first started doing this 25 years ago, there was only a handful of Iranian American or Iranian English performers, but now there's a lot more. And then if you go beyond that, if you go into the wider Middle Eastern world and the Indians and Pakistanis and all that stuff, the world just grows more and more. So I will say of the brown influence, even though Iranians say we're white, it's become a bigger world. So there's a lot of talent out there that I would love to be able to help shed a light on.
Yeah, because if success evolves, doesn't it? What it meant when you're younger changes when you have family, then changes in terms of giving back, etc. And it's such a good thing that you're doing. When it comes to communities, what's more of a harder gig, the Iranian community or non-Iranian in terms of your stand-ups?
I personally prefer diverse audiences. And if anybody comes to my shows, they'll see my audience is very diverse. It's not by any means just Iranians. And some cities, like if you go to Irvine, which is a big Iranian population, the audience may be 40%, 50% Iranian, and then 50% other. But you end up in sometimes there's shows. I did Cairo, there was no Iranians, it was all Egyptians. I do Denver, and there's 10% Iranians. So there's a lot of shows where I was in Madison, Wisconsin. There was shows again with no Iranians, but a diverse audience. I like to have black, white, Asian, Russian, Ukrainian. I like to have it all. And if you look at my Netflix special, you'll see as I'm doing crowd work, there's people of all backgrounds. Even this new special, The Birds and the Bees on YouTube, there's all kinds of, there's a Swedish guy, there's a Venezuelan girl, there's a black guy and a white girl, there's just all kinds of people. And I like that. Anytime you have a homogenous audience, whether it's all Iranian or all Lebanese or all, British or whatever, I'm not a big fan of that, because I feel like they want everything about them. And my show launches from my experiences. But then I've realized also when you do people find it relatable. So I had been touring in the US with my act for the past couple of years. I hadn't done Egypt in over 10 years. And when I went to Cairo, I did my act that I would do anywhere else. Of course, I mentioned a little bit about Egypt at the beginning, but then most of the hour is me talking about what's going on in my life. And they were relating, because I think that you realize the more you talk about your experiences, the more you realize we have those experiences in common.
Yeah, no, I can totally get that. You get different things from different people, and it's a different chemistry as well, rather than it being all the same. Has what's been the highs and lows? The biggest high, the biggest low thus far in your career?
The highs have been plenty. The moment I decided to do this, that was the high, because I had 26 years. I was 26 years old when I really decided to go for it professionally. So it was 26 years, or I should say, listen, when I was 12, I got on stage. I told my family I wanted to be a actor, comedian, all that stuff. And they were like, no. So between 12 to 26, so for 14 years, I was pushing against this wave of don't do this, do something else. So the moment I decided to do it, I was 26 years old. I was working in an advertising agency. There was a gentleman by the name of Joe Ryan, who was in his 60s at the time, and I was in my mid-20s. And he'd seen me perform and said, "Oh, you're funny. Have you thought about doing this?" I said, "Joe, for the past 14 years, I've been trying to do this, and I'm not sure. I might save up money and pursue it in the future." And he said, "Listen, I'm in my 60s." And he goes, "There were some things I wanted to do in my 20s, and I never did it. So if you really want to do it, go do it." So it was a light bulb moment. You got to live for yourself, not to please anybody else. So that in itself was a major highlight. And then after that, it's just been a lot of pinch me moments, being on a set with Sean Penn making the movie The Interpreter. There's Nicole Kidman, hey, how are you? Or Friday After Next with all the Ice Cube and all those folks. And then I got a chance to perform at the White House and introduce Michelle Obama. That was amazing. Got a chance to perform in front of the King of Jordan. Got a chance to give the commencement speech at my alma mater, Berkeley. So there's been a lot of highlights like that. And also, I'll be honest with you, every time I'm on a set or I'm doing a show, I just recently was in the Middle East. I did shows in Abu Dhabi at an arena in front of 6,000 people. And the night before, I was in an outdoor amphitheater in Bahrain in front of 6,000 people. And I felt like a rock star. It was amazing. So those are all great moments. Performing at the Kennedy Center, getting my Netflix special at the Kennedy Center. Those are all moments where you're like flying high. And the lowlights basically come when here's the problem with stand-up comedy. The problem with stand-up comedy is when you tour, there are some cities where you kill it. Like I just told you, I did shows where there was 6,000 people. And then you try some cities that you're not as well known, and you show up and the club owner goes, oh, we've only sold 50 tickets. And you're like, oh my God, I just went from 5,000 to 50. It's just, you're not known in that city. You just haven't broken that. So sometimes that can be a low light in terms of it's almost like having a movie open every weekend because you're going, oh, we had great box office numbers. Now we have horrible box office numbers. But I've learned to also embrace those shows and just have fun with them. Those are some of the shows where if I'm in a town that I'm not well known and we just didn't get the turnout we expected, I try to be loose. I try to do crowd work. I try to make fun of the situation because those 50 fans that did show up are hardcore fans in a city where you're not known. So you should give them the show that they deserve as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And we spoke about it before, confidence, etc. And I think confidence generally, because it can get hit, it's fragile. Even if you're a great tennis player like Novak Djokovic, if you're injured or you're coming back, but you've lost a round one match and then you lose again, those shots that you're ordinarily hitting, like in your sleep, suddenly you're missing. And confidence is this fragile thing that's ever moving. But true confidence, in my opinion, is built through achievements and experience. You've got that inner self-belief. That's what champions do. Even when times are tough, they think, I've been here. I know I can do it. I've just got to rebuild towards that.
Yeah, it's that, but it's also building that muscle. So you do it over again. You keep getting on stage. Like whenever I get a young person asking me, what should I do? I want to be a comedian. I go, get on stage as much as you can, write as much as you can. So if I have been performing for 25 years and doing 5 to 10 sets a week, sometimes when you're in town in Los Angeles or you're in New York, you perform 15 to 20 minute sets, but you do 3 or 4 clubs on a given night. And then when you're out headlining, you do an hour-long set, and you might do those depending if you're doing a theater or you're doing a comedy club. You may end up doing 5 or 6 hour-long sets that weekend. At a certain point, you've done it so much, it's instinct, right? You see these guys that are in the UFC and they're fighting. They're not thinking, oh, I need to grab that guy's head and then use this other arm to grab like this and then maybe bring his head to my knee. No, they're just doing it. It's instinct. It's muscle memory. Same goes for tennis. I saw a documentary with Naomi Osaka, and she was just standing there at the baseline, and her coach was dropping a ball and she was hitting it, dropping a ball, hit it, drop a ball, hit it. And it was just, I told my kids, I go, look, does that over and over again. Now when she's in the match, she's just doing it. She's not thinking about it. So similarly for stand-up, you get on so much that it's instinct. What'll happen is sometimes you'll take a break. I was just in Colombia with my family for about 2 weeks. So for 2 weeks, I wasn't on stage. So when you go back on stage, that first time up, you're just feeling it out a little bit to make sure you got your moves. And then by the next set, you're loose and having a good time and you're back. So it's muscle memory, I think, adds to your confidence and your knowledge that you can do it. And then I think the more years you have in the game, the more confidence. It's almost like Yoda, right? It's like the Force. Eventually, you know how to use the Force and you're just up there confident and comfortable and just owning the room.
Yeah, it's so insightful. Has your success surprised you?
I wouldn't say surprised me. I've always, in the back of my mind, I always thought that I would, quote unquote, make it or be successful. But I tell people, I go, that's not why I did it. If I wanted to be financially successful, I would have gotten into banking or something. Or maybe become a lawyer. There's many other ways to make money and have a secure future than pursuing stand-up comedy. Because I have a lot of people that I know that are very funny people who just never found their audience. So yeah, I didn't think too much about it. I just was like, oh, I'm gonna continue to do this. I will be success for me was just doing this. Again, everything else has been icing on the cake. So I don't really think too much about it. I hope that people continue to discover me. I hope that people continue to realize that I'm always coming up with new stuff. So if I've come to their town and I come back a year later, you're going to see some new stuff. You hope it just keeps going. And again, with things like the YouTube special or presence on social media, I hope people continue to discover and continue to support. And again, I don't think too much about it. I really don't.
Has anyone asked you to change anything about yourself, Maz, during your career?
No, I don't think so. No one's asked me to change anything about me. I'm trying to think. You run into people sometimes where, look, there's been times where I had a part. They gave me a part on a show where the guy was supposed to be a Lebanese guy, and I'm doing it like this. I'm at the table read. We're reading it, and I'm reading it with my voice. And then the director comes up afterwards, goes, "How do you feel about adding a little accent?" And I go, "Oh, okay, I'll add the accent." And it changed the character to a point where it actually made it seem more authentic. So there's been moments like that. But other than that, I've pretty much been able to do it my way, as Frank Sinatra says. Mitzi Shore, when she first made me a regular at the Comedy Store, I talk about it in the special. She originally proposed that I should wear a turban on stage because back then she had all these comedians. Like she had a black comedian, a Latino comedian, and she thought I was going to be her Middle Eastern comedian. And I tell the story in the special about how I got out of wearing the turban. But yeah, no, I've been able to do it my way. I don't think there's, again, I talk about what I find funny. Some people will find it funny. Some people might not. I did a movie called Jimmy Westwood, American Hero. That was a silly movie. It was kind of like my homage to the original Pink Panther. And some people went and saw it and they were like, oh my God, that was such sophomoric humor. And I go, I don't know. I like fart jokes. So there's nothing I can do to help you there.
So do I, by me laughing. What would the older Maz tell the younger Maz?
The older Maz, I think the older Maz would tell the younger Maz, go for it at an earlier age. I really got intimidated early on. I almost started trying to do stand up at the age of 17. And I got a little worried that, not because of my parents, I got worried because I thought my material wasn't going to go over well and it was just going to crush me. And so I had a chance to do this open mic talent show at the age of 17 and I just didn't do it. If I could go back and say, go for it, I would have said, go for it. I would have told the younger Maz that it's going to be not just one night, it's going to be many nights of you doing it till you find it. So yeah, but then again, at the same time, my experiences that I had those years when I wasn't doing comedy were some of the best experiences of my life. When I was in college, I got to go study abroad in Italy for 1 year. That was an amazing year. I made some of my best friends those 4 years at Cal. So again, I would tell me to start earlier, but I also don't regret the fact that I didn't because of the experiences that I was able to have.
Yeah, because the thing about regrets, you can't really change them. And the thing about if never comes either. It's better to have gone for things, even to have lost, than never to have gone for it in the first place. And yeah, Italy I also love, and it's not very good for the waistline because the food's just too damn good. A bit like second to Iranian cooking food. So as we're finishing the podcast, I wanted to ask, when's the last time you've been back to Iran? And is there an ambition inside you that one day you might be able to do stand-up comedy in Tehran?
The last time I was back was probably, I think it was the end of 1998. My father had moved back to try and do some stuff with some of his old properties. And I went there with my siblings to visit him for 2 weeks. And it was beautiful to be a place I hadn't been for 20 years at that point. And it's amazing because your sense of smell and taste and all that stuff just came back. And it was great to see the family. It was great to see the country of my birth. It was a little sad because I saw how overpopulated, overpolluted Tehran was. I saw how mismanaged the city was and how mismanaged the country was. I ran into a lot of young people who wanted to get out of Iran because there just wasn't opportunity for them. So all of that was sad. I would love to be able to go. If I had been able to go, I think because of my being vocal of my criticism of the government, I can't go back. And so I wish I could have gone back freely all these years. I would have taken my family there at least 1 or 2 summers and just spent the summer there. As Iran's a beautiful country, the people are amazing. And it would be amazing to do a comedy show in Iran one day. It would be my first time I've ever done stand up in Persian because all my stand up is in English. But if Iran were to be free, I would definitely find a way to do stand up in Persian and go perform there. It would be amazing.
Yeah, it would be amazing. I always say the biggest brain drain of any country has come from Iran. I think it's been about 8 million Iranians have left and have been hugely successful at times as well, especially in America. But it's been a tragedy as well because there's been families that have been broken up, leaving your home, starting life in a new country. Sometimes people going from a completely different type of culture. If they move to Sweden, it's very different to Iran. The food, it's not very nice in Sweden. Sorry, Swedish people, but I like my gorma sabzi, my badamjun, and my taduk, and all of that kind of stuff. And it's been tough decisions because people have been searching for what people want. Is the human condition, opportunity, hope, a sense of safety, a sense of having to be able to become someone rather than what's happened there.
Which parent is Iranian?
My dad's a Kurdish Iranian from Kermanshah, so I lived during the Iran-Iraq War for 4 years. I came to the UK, couldn't speak a word of English, now can't speak much of Farsi, so it's gone the other way, my weird brain. And then I went back and forth, and I actually was, at the time of 99, I think it was when Khatami was in charge, and it was those student riots in Tehran.
Yeah.
And I've always followed it because, for me, I left Iran, but Iran never left me. Yeah, exactly. It's always been in my heart. And even in a football match, if it's Iran versus England, I'd always be supporting Team Melli. I've always been following it. Even though I couldn't speak it, I just had this love for it, the culture and everything about it.
I think that's very common. I think that's very common. And what you were saying about the brain drain and people leaving, I think that's why I have so much sympathy for immigrants in general or people that are refugees. Whether it's the Syrians or Hondurans or Venezuelans, or you hear about all this stuff at the border, and it just breaks my heart. Because I always tell people, I go, people are leaving a bad situation to come to this country, meaning America in this case. No one is sitting in a situation where, oh, life is great, we're making money, our family's happy. Let's get up and go somewhere we don't speak that language and they don't want us. So there is this lack of sympathy for people suffering in other parts of the world sometimes, because I think it's easy for politicians to blame immigrants for our problems. But the truth is, if you give a lot of these immigrants opportunities, they do very well. They want to do very well. They love the country that gives them the opportunity. That's one of the reasons I called my Netflix special Immigrant, because I wanted to show that immigrants are doing good for America. That was the time when Trump had just come in and there was a lot of anti-immigrant sentiments. Yeah, it's sad to see that Iran has lost so much brain power and so much potential because of the way the government mismanages the country.
Yeah, it's so true. And my last question, people often talk about success and it's relative and all of that kind of stuff. And I often say success is about having a meaningful life, which is to have a meaningful career, a meaningful relationship, and to make a difference. When it comes to legacy, or what would you want to be best known for or remembered by?
He had a beautiful bald head. No, I think I'm a nice person, and I think that a lot of people say that about me, and I try to be nice because I know people are going through a lot, and I don't know if it's by nature or what. I just know I've learned to appreciate my life. I remember when I was a kid in Iran, my grandmother used to teach me. She said, if you ever see somebody who's less fortunate than you, whether they're in a wheelchair or they're poor or whatever, you usually look up in the sky and say 7 times you have to do that. And of course, you're driving through downtown Tehran and there's all kinds of mayhem going on. So I'm constantly looking up in the sky and thanking God for what I have. And so I'm not religious, but I've always just tried to be good to people. And so I would hope that's something that I'm remembered for. I've had a friend of mine, Dom Herrera, who's a comedian I look up to and was one of the comics that inspired me to get into comedy. And he's told me, he said, once in a while, he said, we were talking to, we said, who's the, what do you say, happiest or nicest? One of those. Who's the happiest comedian or the nicest comedian? And he goes, we decided it's you. And I was like, I go, not the funniest, just the nicest? He's like, yeah, sorry, you're the nicest. You're not the funniest. I'll take the nicest. I'll take that's fine. Because there's no reason not to be nice.
Yeah, it's true. There's no price for manners and just treating people in a kind, compassionate way. I want to say thank you so much for appearing on Successful Iranians. I know how busy you are. Blessings to your family. I know you're very much a big family person as well. How can people reach out to subscribe to the new show, everything else? What's the best kind
Well,
of
the
fit?
show is very easy. They just go to YouTube and either put in Maz Jobrani, Mazjobrani, or they go to YouTube and enter the words The Birds and the Bees. And it's my new stand-up comedy special. I hope they enjoy it. I hope that they leave a comment, tell their friends, spread the word, help the algorithm recognize that you're watching it. And then on social media, I'm at Maz Jobrani on every platform, so they can follow me there as well.
Thank you so much, Maz.
Thank you, Johnny. Take care.